Hello and welcome to the Jazz Bass Journal, the place where we get a perspective on jazz from the low end. My name is Chip Boaz, and this is our first listening session. I think that the only thing that comes close in fun value to playing the bass in jazz is listening to some great jazz with some great bass playing. This is why I put together my playlist, The Low End Jazz Bassists. That's why I update it with new music every couple of weeks. And that's why I want to spend these listening sessions digging in to specific tunes and specific bass players. This week, we're going to be looking at a tune called Camino. This comes from an album called Angular Blues by Wolfgang Muthspiel, Scott Colley, and Brian Blade. The bassist on this is the amazing Scott Colley, who is a pretty important player in the modern jazz world. Scott got to be the bassist he is through years of experience. He was born in 1963, growing up in Los Angeles. He gravitated to the bass early and really embraced that magnificent instrument all the way through high school. He moved on to study music at Cal Arts, where he got to work with two very heavyweight bassists, jazz legend Charlie Haden and Los Angeles Philharmonic bassist Fred Tinsley. Can you imagine having two mentors like that? I mean, what an amazing experience that would have been, and how much deep musical knowledge you could pull out of that. Well, Scott did. And before he graduated Cal Arts, he was on the road and recording with Carmen McRae. Once he graduated from Cal Arts, he moved to New York, where he found a lot of work with some really great musicians. He continued working with Carmen, but he also played with folks like John Scofield, Dizzy Gillespie, Joe Henderson, and so many more. Over the next 2 decades, Scott got to play and tour with some of the best in jazz. Everyone from saxophonist Joe Lovano to legendary pianist Herbie Hancock, Andrew Hill, Bobby Hutcherson, Chris Potter, and so many more. He really, through that experience, developed a very unique way of approaching the instrument in jazz, and he carried that approach onto his own albums, stepping out as a leader in 1997. Scott showed that he was a bass player and composer and great band leader through a lot of fantastic albums. That started in 1997 with the album Portable Universe and continues on today. Scott Colley at this point is one of those names you just need to know about in jazz bass, and he continues to exert a big influence on the modern jazz world. You can hear all of that deep musical insight on the album Angular Blues, which features Scott on bass alongside guitarist Wolfgang Muthspiel and drummer Brian Blade. That's a heavy combination of musicians right there, and the results are so cool. You can hear that on the track Camino, where Muthspiel starts things off with a solo guitar introduction, which sets up the main theme for the music. When Colley and Blade enter, they start by giving the music a lot of space and growing with that. Colley's groove on this really shows his willingness to take risks and give himself over to the music, which is one of the things that lots of people, including myself, love about his playing. He's listening constantly, interacting to the rhythms that Brian's playing on drums while interjecting melodies against Wolfgang's guitar solo. It really becomes more of a conversational style of playing bass and jazz, which is very cool. It harkens back to people like Scott LaFaro and Eddie Gomez in the Bill Evans trio, the way that the bass played that role covering rhythm, melody, and form, but also joined in and commented on the improvisations with some melodic work. Really deep playing that requires big ears and a willingness to step outside the box and take a risk. Colley does that amazingly here. This all builds into Colley's solo, and it's really amazing how assertive he is with his melodic playing while still, interacting with the rhythm and harmony happening around him. He uses a strong thematic approach, running lines successively further up the neck to build a statement. And he does this in relationship to the syncopated rhythms happening, to the comping patterns. You really hear the conversation happening. It's really inspiring work that puts Colley in the spotlight, but it's interesting how it kind of builds on the melodic way that he was accompanying earlier. It's a real fine line, but it's very defined because of the way that Colley approaches it. Very inspired stuff. I highly recommend going back to the playlist and checking out Camino. From there, jump right to Angular Blues and listen to the whole album. It's a beautiful collection of music with a really unique approach to jazz. Colley's bass work throughout is inspired. I think you'd enjoy it a lot. From there, jump into Colley's other work and hear some of the great things he's done, both as a band leader and accompanying some of the legends in jazz. Colley is a bass player to hear, and I think you would enjoy checking out his work. I want to make special mention that our most recent playlist includes 2 tracks that are a tribute to 2 legendary bassists that we lost this past week to COVID-19. The first one is a song called New York Descargas, which features the great bassist Andy Gonzalez. Andy was a really important player in my development. His work with the Fort Apache Band and Orquesta Libre was groundbreaking. His tumbao, the Latin jazz bass style that he used, really broke boundaries. His concept was one that really drew between Cuban, Puerto Rican, and jazz music in a very unique way. The second track is Monin, and that features bassist Jamie Merritt. I listened to Jamie a lot through his work with Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers and Lee Morgan. His sense of groove and melody was so important in that hard bop era and beyond. I'm going to be doing some special tributes to both Andy and Jamie in the near future. So for now, check out that music on the playlist, and we'll be paying tribute to those great bassists soon. Thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoyed sitting down and talking about some music with me. I'll be back with another episode of the Jazz Bass Journal, where I'll be talking about some things bass related later this week. Please subscribe to the channel so that you can catch all the listening sessions, all the episodes of the Jazz Bass Journal, all of the music that I put out there, and stay up with everything jazz and everything bass. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.